To set the stage, I want to show some results from a recent CCJ survey. 47% of fleets transitioned at least part of their non-driving employees to working from home, and at the peak of the pandemic, more than half of their staff was working remotely. 84% of respondents said that back office personnel were tucked away in home offices at some point. I found it interesting, it doesn't show it on this slide, but 22% of fleets noted an improvement in the amount of work that's getting accomplished, and 24 saw improvements in quality, but 55% said that remote meetings were less impactful. I want to start with introductions. Let's start with you, Matt, and then go to Mauricio, nickname Mo. Well, we can call him Mo, right? Yeah. So let's tell us about your career, the role you play at your companies, and tell us how your career has changed during the past year of, I assume, remote work. Go ahead, Matt.
Absolutely. Good morning. So I've been in transportation. It's been about, 10 years now. I started with land air transport, working actually as an intern. So it's been a good journey through back office and accounting. Did maintenance for a while. Land air was acquired by Covenant Transport in July of 2018. And at that point moved into a recruiting role. So I've been doing that for about the last 3 years. Big thing over the last year has been remote. We were very, everybody in the office, I needed to look at you, right, to make sure that you're doing what we need you to do. So that's been a change. We've also seen some significant changes with the pandemic around driver recruiting that we'll get into here a little bit later.
My name is Mauricio Paredes. I'm the VP of Technology for PS Logistics. PS Logistics is actually located a couple of minutes away from here. I wasn't part of that 50%. I kept coming to the office, but we definitely, the way we approached the pandemic was as if it was a disaster, where we still had access to our data center, but we couldn't reach our offices. So one of the first things we did early on was do a full enterprise-wide test. We sent everybody home, make sure everybody knew what to do to connect back to our systems, and make sure that our pipes and servers could handle 700 plus users connecting to our TMS from home. After we knew that we were capable of doing that, then we were way more comfortable with, different work arrangements. Dispatch never went full remote, but about 53%. We did A/B rotations, back office. That slide is kind of dead on. Back office and those people that could actually do their work 100% remote went remote. Now we're slowly coming back. Still a lot of protocols in place. A lot of the plexiglass still in place. We're still doing the masks, no big meetings. That was the past year and a half. For IT, it was challenging, but my team actually did it well. So PS Logistics fared rather well.
So COVID created a adapt or die business environment, and 64% of respondents said they accelerated the adoption of new technologies, and we'll talk about some of these today. The one that stands out to me is document management at 75%. And then followed by safety, risk management, driver mobile apps, and driver training tools. So for our first topic of discussion, let's start with what you and your companies have been doing with or without technology to really improve the work experience for drivers over the past year or so, because that's really kind of the most pressing issue is drivers, right? So this has truly been a unique moment where fleets are doing some very interesting things. Matt, I'll come sit down here. So Matt, given your role at Covenant Logistics, there are a lot of areas we could cover here about drivers, but let's start with orientation training and onboarding. We talked about remote work, and some people have been successful doing remote onboarding and training, and others maybe not so much. But what have you done, or what are you doing differently to bring new drivers into your company, train them, and set them up for success in the first few days, weeks, and months of the job?
Yes, so when the pandemic hit, we were everything on site, quickly stood up and really in a span of about 2 weeks doing online orientation. So that's something that has stuck post, and I say post, but I know we're in the middle of Delta variant and everything else right now. But that's allowed us to really meet a driver where they're at. So many drivers did not want to travel by bus, plane, car, come into a large group of people at that time. So what we were able to do was take that, do a fully remote orientation, including doing their driving test and bring them on board that way, and really hire the drivers that we needed at the time without ever setting foot in our office building and then seating a truck. So that's something that has stayed. We've also created a retention department that we've had one a long time ago, brought one on again now. So they're really looking at that driver from not only when they come on board with us, but what my group telling those drivers from recruiting and that their expectations align before they even get into the seat. And then also for the first 60 days that they're with the company, following up with them on a routine basis, just to make sure that what we're telling the driver meets their expectations, but then also is in practice once they get with operations and start running for us.
So if I heard you correctly, you do remote, or you did, maybe you still do, remote driving tests. How does that work?
So we partner with, as many of you probably know, Covenant. We have a large portion of our hires every week and month are student hires. So we've partnered with some of our driving schools to where they would still, go to somewhere that's close to their home and still have a driver trainer at one of the driving schools do a driving test with them, but just not having to come to one of our on-site orientation locations.
Okay. In my head, I was picturing you using some virtual technologies to do ride-alongs, but not quite.
Not there yet.
So let's go to you, Mo. So as Vice President of Technology, I'm sure you're being pulled into a lot of meetings and being asked to do some things which may or may not seem impossible at times. What are some needs that your leadership identified in 2020 and this year that have turned into driver-related projects? And which of these have directly benefited drivers in terms of job satisfaction and retention?
So, as I said, we ended up doing this rotation, A/B, have people at home, have people at the office. And then what we've noticed is there was a lot of informal communication that was happening on the floors that needed to be quickly become formal. Our users were very adept at the tools that we gave them. So we quickly started seeing chats come up and group chats and having that information there. What ended up becoming projects was the realization that a lot of this information that was actually in the system needed to be reviewed, that wasn't accurate enough. So a lot of the projects that have come out of the pandemic is actually looking at the data that we have on our TMSs and the data that we're sending our drivers to make sure that it's appropriate, is being sent at the appropriate time, is it correct? And even from the dispatcher to the planner and vice versa, are they entering the right things into the system? We're currently just doing a lot of data cleanup, making sure that we match commodities with videos for securement. We're making sure directions are appropriate. And then we're changing technology in the cab to make sure that all that information is making it to the drivers at the right time, and it's the proper information that they need to do their job. After I heard the retention lady, I never thought it helps that respect aspect of it, because nobody wants to waste their time, and bad instructions, bad data, we realize that's just wasting everybody's time. So it came afloat by not having people sitting next to you and making up for the fact that something was faulty in the system because you could just talk to somebody who was next. Yeah. So we're looking to address all of that right now.
Yeah, that definitely, the COVID pandemic accelerated that. You were working on it anyway, but it may not have been as much focus as it.
Well, it put everybody. We saw it as a need. New communication channels, new technology. Everybody. It's hard to change how people use systems, right? People get used to using the system in a certain way. The good thing, if there is a positive to the pandemic, is that people realize they have to get better at technology really fast. And they did, as long as it was available, they were able to be very versatile on how they used it and change a lot a lot of the way that they used it. And it's worked so far. So now what we're doing is leverage all that new technology, all those new processes, all those new things that people have learned to improve on our processes, even though they're back in the office. So it gave us a good jump start.
Yeah, absolutely. So next, let's discuss a trend that seems to be picking up recently, and that's acquisitions. In fact, I won't say who, but I was talking to a fleet owner yesterday who said, "Oh, I'm getting calls, people wanting to buy me." So fleets need drivers and are willing to buy companies to get them. So profits are up, capacity is tight, and both of your companies have made several acquisitions in the past, and perhaps you've still got some tricks up your sleeve. So Matt, first of all, Covenant has a very diverse operation, but your specialty is expedited shipments with team drivers, and I imagine that team drivers are very difficult to recruit. Have your acquisitions helped support your team model and perhaps even helped you create a pipeline to get drivers who are maybe currently solo drivers interested in team operations, maybe even more so over the past year during the pandemic?
So yeah, our last acquisition was Land Air in July of 2018, as I mentioned. So what that's, and as you said, Covenant is known for expedited team operations. What's probably not as well known is we're now about 50% of our driving fleet is actually solo dedicated. So what that has helped us do, especially accelerated over the last year, is as you said, many drivers when the pandemic hit too, and we've seen that shift going on for a while now, but moving away from OTR in general to a more local, if possible, route was we're losing these drivers every week from OTR. So how do we create a career path for them? Because we have 3,500 driving jobs. So typically we have something available that could fit the need of that driver, going back to really, and it ties back into respect, like we were talking about earlier. None of us sitting in office want to find out that there was a position open that we didn't know about that we wanted to apply for. Well, we were finding out that we had drivers that were leaving us every week that just didn't know that we had those positions available. So what that's allowed us to do is when we meet with students and talk with students is to say, hey, we're kind of a one-stop shop, is that we can come in and you can go get your experience in team. If you like team, you can make great money doing it and continue to do it. But if not, give us 90 to 120 days, and then there's other opportunities for you to move into a solo dedicated job if that's what you want, or solo OTR, solo local. Yeah. So that having the acquisitions, the last three big ones that we've had have really been focused on solo. So that's allowed us to do that and have that pipeline to grow our teams on the front end, but then give drivers options within the company on the back end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so if drivers have a frustrating experience, it's like, hey, don't give up. We've got other options for you.
Right. Yeah, right. Absolutely. And we have some, our fleet managers and driver managers are, they're the front lines for that, right? So they have some KPIs and incentives around that on keeping drivers. Obviously, all DMs want to keep those drivers on their fleet and keep their own trucks seated, but if a driver is ready to leave, it's a lot better to keep them within your family instead of letting them go elsewhere.
All right. So, Mo, I'm sure a lot of your time and efforts, you guys have made quite a number of acquisitions, and I'm sure you've been focused on getting your acquired companies to operate as part of a single entity. What are some things that P&S Transportation has done to accelerate those acquired companies' transition to P&S to be more efficient and such?
Yeah. Acquisitions are great.
Yeah.
So a therapist tells me I have to tell myself. They're just awesome. From the technology, we kind of come in when the acquisition is already formed, right? It already makes commercial sense. We go through great efforts to make sure that first load that gets dispatched on the new entity gets dispatched on the same TMS that is shared by the other 17 operating companies. So what happens from day one is that through technology, this new entity gets a brand new TMS, a jolt of technology, and it gets visibility over a much larger freight network. So we're able, from the beginning, to show improvements, right? What we do on our teams is we deploy operations, a large team of operations first, right, to make sure that they're getting to use our TMS. We're still not changing whatever their special sauce in operation is. We deploy a large team, and then following that, then we just follow the cycle. So right after operations kind of dispatches their first week worth of loads, then we follow it up with a large team for settlements, then payroll, and then billing, and then we support at least one entire business cycle with a large team from PS Logistics that is well-versed on our processes, well-versed on our TMS, and is out there basically bringing this other entity really fast into our fold. Our different entities are all at different levels of, maturity on their processes. Some of them require a little more convincing that what we do works. So it's kind of a moving target. We're constantly showing them what the TMS can do, what the processes can do, how can they leverage the other companies. It's just ongoing. There's plenty to learn. I think every acquisition I learned something. My technology background wasn't always transportation. I did banking, I did other things. So I always learned something about transportation. And then every acquisition teaches us how to do something better at whatever they're good at, right? And then what hopefully PS Logistics does for them is improves on what they were faulty at. Maybe the backhaul, or maybe their TMS was too old, maybe their customers needed EDI, and we can offer those things to those new entities on day one. So they buy into the improvements that we show from technology, they buy into the new processes, and we're able to show improvement almost instantly.
And when was your last acquisition?
2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
Texas, I think you guys published something on it.
That's right.
Patriot Transport.
Oh, that's right. Cool. Yeah. So as many of you already know, CCJ recognizes a different company each month as a CCJ innovator, and both Covenant and P&S Transportation have both been recognized in the past as innovators. And maybe we just get a quick update on the efforts. It hasn't been too long ago that we featured them in our magazine. So Matt, Covenant was recognized for improving its business with advanced analytics and technology and solving problems in routing and driver management. I'm sure, like most things, that's ever changing, and you're always updating things. Can you give us an idea of what's been going on in those areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So really 2 areas to talk about would be our driver relationship management tool. Yeah. That is always being revamped and looked at. It's got a few different pieces to it now with the new retention department that's being stood up. I know one of the things that that group is working on too is how do we improve that predictive piece of if you can get in front of knowing a driver's going to leave before they leave, right? So you can fix it. So that's one thing that we're looking at. It has basically it's a dashboard for our DMs that they can look and see everything from important KPIs as far as utilization and things like that, but also where's the driver at on their paycheck to make sure that they're getting the pay that they expect and that we expect for them to get. When's their next home time, making sure that we get them home when we need, so that when we've committed to them. The other thing's our weather routing program. So that's something that we actually have a meteorologist on staff that works with the IT team on that. So that's been very important in reducing accidents and claims costs. So it's tied in with our routing software to stop drivers from shutting them down, and a lot of that is data that we're getting from the driver live as well while they're out there on the road that, hey, this area may not be safe. So continually looking at that to route them as well in the safest and then also the most efficient to where we can get through fuel stops, not having to make multiple stops for fuel as well. So those are things that are continually evolving and improving. And
I may be incorrect in my memory may be incorrect, but do you guys also monitor driver fatigue, like use hours of service to predict their fatigue levels?
So we do look at that, and I know we'll talk a little bit later as well. But we're looking at some of the technologies and looking at testing later this year some of the fatigue management through cameras and AI. So that's something that we're getting ready to roll out and test with a few drivers.
Oh, cool. So and Mo, P&S was recognized for putting business intelligence tools in the hands of users at all levels in the company. And I'm sure this capability has been needed now more than ever during that pandemic, especially as people are working remotely and don't have the experience, can't rely on the experience and knowledge of others as much, maybe. Do you have some examples of some additional breakthroughs you've been able to make by getting these data insights in the hands of users?
Data and data cleanup and usability, I got a job for a while. Job security. Yeah, I mean, we continue. The way we approached it, we didn't bring a data analyst. We didn't bring somebody and just give them all our data and then ask them for results. What we've done is we've taken people that were data curious, I will say, from each department, and we started teaching them tools to do that. So for example, we took our safety department and we started teaching them all the tools that are out there for data analytics. So I mean, from teaching Power BI, teaching how to do a dashboard, and then cultivating that curiosity on them. Well, what that's resulted on is we've had now this data, I would say, evangelists within each departments that present the data to their team members in language and in manners that are useful to them, right? It's not an IT person creating a dashboard that then gets handed over to safety. No, it's a safety person creating a dashboard saying, this is the number that matters to my department. It also allows us to very quickly make adjustments because they're sitting right next to the executive of that department, and the executive says, no, that's not what I want to focus on, so they can quickly make those dashboard changes. So, I mean, we continue on that, and just like our different operating companies, very different departments are at different levels of that path, but they all see the benefits from, like, let's say, our weekly safety meetings. They see how they use dashboards. They see how they present them. That's something that we do as we finally identify that person within that department that wants to do it. We have them sit in on the meetings of other departments so they can view how they use the tools. So they can see what a dashboard does, what type of conversation it occurs, if they have to do drill downs, how does that work? And then usually that makes them ask questions, and then that's how we start the whole teaching aspect of it. As far as what data's shown, I mean, we use it for retention. We do predictive analytics on a lot of stuff, especially about driver retention. We turn around that data and we make it available to our retention department to make sure that we're trying to get in front of the drivers, not before they call us, we're calling them to check on them. I was just talking to some of the people at our table. We have an outreach department, so somebody who's keeping in touch with the driver, not just an operation conversation, but just more of a personal conversation. Believe it or not, they also use data to try to engage. You know, who do they reach out to? Not just their birthdays, of course, and anniversaries, but you know, are they now not delivering at the same rate, at the same time that they used to deliver on the weeks prior? So, I mean, data's there. We do have to do a lot of cleanup, but once we see it kind of clean, then we start building processes on it, and then the processes are around recruiting, retention, and of course, the bottom line eventually.
Would you mind telling us what are some of those key indicators you look at for retention? I imagine maybe like fluctuation of pay would be one, but...
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
We do that. We also try to see if we can capture sentiment on messages that go back and forth. We also try to see if there is a change on patterns, right? Usually what we push for is early Monday deliveries, so we know who does deliver before Monday. If you have a constant pattern of early Monday deliveries and now you don't, right? If it's a one Monday, then that's fine. But if it just drastically changes, then we try to find out what's going on, and usually means they're not getting out of the house on time or something like that. I mean, I kind of just show the data, somebody else goes digging into why. But yeah, I mean, pattern recognition is something that we do, and it's easily shown on any scatter chart. And then you just have to build a process around what to do with it, because just data without process doesn't do anything.
Yeah. And Matt, you mentioned you have a driver CRM system. Any additional metrics that maybe you found useful that you could share?
Yeah, so of course you hit on pay, but we also obviously look at home time, but we also look, one of the big things that we looked at as well is how many times have they been in the shop over a set number of period. That's another key indicator that we've seen that a lot of times will obviously tie into lower pay, but having that information gives you another indicator of, hey, here's another area they could be frustrated in because truck's been in the shop, 4 or 5 times in the last 6 months or something like that we look at.
Okay. What is it about technology drivers don't like? Because my experiences in talking with fleets, at least, is they say drivers appreciate the convenience, the maybe not having to talk to dispatch as much, having better information. What's been your experience? Do drivers like technology? Do you disagree with that maybe assessment?
I disagree, yeah. I think drivers are way more technically savvy than you give them credit for. I mean, we've seen it where we give them a tool. For example, we added this thing to our driver app where you can see your settlements pre-paycheck. So your pending settlements, right? Everybody has payroll after you've issued a check. But what we try to do is, if a driver is using our app to send us the document, we should be able to build that load within half an hour, 45 minutes of receiving that document. The moment that we build that load, it automatically settles. So it goes into the driver settlement account. Well, the drivers can be constantly monitoring their settlement account and understand, hey, why are you missing this load if I delivered it yesterday, right? If they're used to seeing it going to settlements 45 or an hour before. So they contact the driver manager and they tell them, hey, I delivered this, I sent my document, what's going on? And then usually something, maybe an unreadable BOL or something was missing, and they're able to act, but they're able to fix that before we issue the paycheck, right? So the pays have become way more accurate just because there's more engagement pre the issuance of that check. Well, that whole module, we thought it was going to be a complex module for drivers to use. But the moment it goes down, the phone rings, I mean, within minutes. And there's drivers and then telling us it's down, it's not working. I've also seen it, I belong to a couple of the Facebook groups where drivers also share their experiences, and they also tell other drivers how to use it. And I think, that just shows how technically savvy the drivers are. Based on that, we're doing some projects where we're changing the technology in the cabs to communicate to the drivers because we think we can give them more tools, more resources, to be more transparent with the data we have, to show them what we see, to give them, as I said, all that data that we're evaluating and correcting to make sure that they have a say on what actually is being sent to them. So I think drivers like technology. They might not like the camera thing. I agree with that. But the technology, like expecting more from their mobile comm device, expecting more from their trucks, expecting more from what we can tell them about performance, how can we help them make more money. If I can frame technology around those things, they'll accept it and they'll get to use it fast.
I think Mo hit a great point there at the end. I think it's how you frame it. I've been involved with both where one, it doesn't go very well when you just, hey, you're putting a camera in your truck and you don't really train or explain what's going on. But I think it really goes how you communicate and roll that out to the driver and really center that around, number one, it's for your safety. It's to protect you. I can't remember the exact percentages, but as we all know, the majority of accidents are not the driver's fault. So showing them that, at the end of the day, we're doing this for your safety, to protect your CDL, to protect the company from lawsuits as well, but framing it in that way instead of Big Brother watching you all the time is very important, and from what I've seen, way more successful on the drivers adopting that.
So Matt, some large fleets have already started to partner with and even invest in some of these self-driving companies. I've heard some of these developers of these technologies say, it could be 2023 when these trucks start to hit the road. But of course, there's a lot of details that need to be worked out. But Can you tell us, maybe Covenant isn't investing in self-driving trucks at this point, but you're probably doing things that are building that foundation, like making office staff more efficient and maybe automating some tasks that could lead you down that road when you're ready. Do you have any thoughts along those lines?
Yeah, so we are in talks with multiple autonomous technology companies. My experience and my understanding of that too would be, I would encourage everyone to obviously speak with those companies because it's coming, right? To some degree. The other things we've done, we do have one level 2 truck in our fleet today that a team that's been with us for a while is running and giving us good feedback. We also have, adopted many of the technologies that are steps on the path to that, being your lane departure warnings and things like that, adaptive cruise control, things like that are steps along the way to getting drivers comfortable with that. Mm-hmm. We've also worked to automate a lot of workflows, based on geofencing, things like that, if and when the day comes that there's autonomous trucks on the road, that helps that you've already got that technology in place based on GPS tracking. Exactly.
Yeah. Otherwise, a human would have to do that, and the point is to not have a human in the vehicle. You can't rely on that data you need to complete the trips and everything else. So, Mo, let me turn this over to you. So, I know in past conversations you really understand cryptocurrency and blockchain, which is something I don't. So what are your thoughts on the future of connectivity between shippers, carriers, and freight brokers and others who are in the mix? Do you, maybe blockchain hasn't materialized like maybe you thought it would and others thought it would, but what are some areas you see that could be transformative for freight transactions?
Oh, the blockchain question. PS Logistics and I personally was an early member of the Blockchain in Transportation Alliance. I'm still a member. Mm-hmm. Still very bullish on the technology. I think, blockchain, besides the whole cryptocurrency, it's really like a digital representation of a physical transaction, right? And the way I look at it is, that's what we do every day. We take something from the shipper, we're trusted with that item to be delivered to the consignee, and then after we deliver it, we basically have this one piece of paper that everybody holds on to it as the official record of that transaction, and all the trust, the payments, and everything, it's based on that piece of paper. And from the technology aspect, I see 5G, we see IoT, we see all the data coming from these trucks, and I see way more information on that transaction that can fit on that piece of paper. So to me, the piece of paper is going to eventually have to go away because you're going to want to know all those details that happen on that transaction because that's what instills the trust on the transaction that actually happened. So, blockchain, it's made to do that. I think what eventually will happen is it'll go into a product, and then everybody will start using blockchain without really knowing what blockchain does, mm-hmm. but just simply trusting the fact that it's stamped as this is a blockchain approved transaction, something similar to I think what people do now when they do transactions on their banks, and all they're looking for is that little secure browser transaction, right? That is an SSL certificate, secure thing. There's a whole technology thing that makes that secure browser. You don't understand it, but you know that if you're talking to your bank or you're doing a transaction to your bank, all you're looking for is that little lock green label on your browser. Well, blockchain will do that. You'll know that if they tell you this fish was never frozen, it was never frozen, or this fish came from, I don't know, wherever you want to get your fish from, it actually came from there. So I'm still very bullish on that technology. I still, every time I, as a carrier, tell them what I would like that technology to provide, I'm there speaking, but it really, I think for it to be at the customer level, the carrier level, we need the TMS, we need the service providers to see the value on it.